Hello, juniors. So last week we talked about morality and its source. Like, where does morality come from? So as we were looking at this, we noticed that it didn't come from instinct and it didn't come from our culture. So in other words, we have this outside information. Somehow we have this information that we're unaware of, or rather, we're unaware of its source. So historically, we've recognized that this natural law is something that's written in the hearts of humankind, not any one person particular as much as for everyone. Now, this doesn't, of course, mean that every single person has this law written in their hearts. There are exceptions, but for as a rule, this is humankind. So, what is this natural law, and where is it sourced? Okay, so natural law. When we talk about laws, we're talking about rules that we follow from some competent authority, right? So there's an authority over us, and we're following the law that they give us, right? So when we're looking at law, we have law written out in several different ways. We have eternal law, right? We have natural law, we have revealed law, and when we have civil and ecclesiastical laws. Okay, so these all come in, these all these different laws are different. So let's go through them again. Let's go through one by one. Eternal law. So eternal law is the law that comes from God himself, that God himself imputes law upon all of creation just by his presence, right? So the key thing you're going to find is that all of these are interrelated. So God himself is just and good, and therefore that goodness and justice flows from him, and it flows from him in one sense in the form of law, that there's an order to the universe, that there's an order to the way that humankind is supposed to behave. There's an order that the way the angels behave. There's an order to the everything. This is eternal law. Now, how does eternal law work in our lives? Well, it really comes down to natural law. So natural law is that basic law that's written into humankind. So let's talk a little bit about what's included in natural law, right? Well, the first and foremost thing that I think all of us can recognize is that every single human person has dignity. That every single human person, whether they're a pauper or whether they're a king, whether they are good or bad, regardless, just by the nature of them existing as human persons, that human persons have dignity. That is, that we're called to have some level of respect for them simply because they're human. What do I mean? Well, what I mean is, for example, we can't use humans as test subjects. We can't use them against their will. This is why slavery is wrong. It assaults the dignity of the human person. I can't take a bunch of people just because I feel like it and start running tests on them against their knowledge and against their consent. Why? Because they're due a fundamental respect, a fundamental dignity. Notice that I can do this with other things. I can do this with rats, for example. This is why scientists often use rats to study disease, because there's no moral component to not doing that. Not saying that we should torture animals. I'm not saying that by any means. I'm simply saying that there's something special about the human person that commands dignity. And we can see this present in all cultures and all religions and all times, right? That somehow there's something about the person, the human person, that we have to have some level of carefulness in regarding. We can't be unnecessarily cruel. To do so would be wrong. We can't be unnecessarily. We can't act in the world without thinking of others, how that might impact others. This fundamental dignity that each human person has, this is like the heart and soul of what natural law is built on. So what does this dignity entail? Well, it of course, and it first and foremost, it's a protection of the individual person and their physical form. Like, for example, me, I have a body. You're not allowed to come up and cut off my arm because you want to eat it. Why? Because I'm a human, and you can't, we're not allowed to assault a human person in that way. We see that this law is present because in every culture and in every place, compassion towards humans is always seen as a good. In other words, when you are thinking of and caring for some other person, that is, no matter what culture you're in the world, no matter where you are, that's naturally seen as a good. When we see people who are serving the poor, when we see people who are helping the elderly, when we see people who are defending the innocent, when we see people who are doing any of those kinds of things, we can't help but recognize it as a good. Why? Because every single person, no matter who they are, has respect and dignity that is automatically associated with them simply because of their humanity. This is natural law, right? So natural law. How does natural law actually pan out? How do we appropriate this dignity towards the human person in a way that we can always make sure that we're doing that effectively? Well, the first and foremost is to remember how we came into being. We come into being through God's love, that God loves us so much that he brought us into being simply because he liked the idea of us, right? And in doing so, makes us in his own image and likeness, that we somehow share some quality that God has, primarily that of mind, that of being, right? That we have a spirit and a soul in us that mirrors the being of God. I have experience. I have and I have a point of view. I have a way of seeing the world that is internal to me. That I share God's eternal existence by having my finite existence. Because of this, every single person has a natural desire to try and seek God. That we're trying to figure out who God is, that we're trying to come back to that which from which we come. We have a desire, a longing for God. However, there's a problem, and the problem is that we have fallen. That we have somehow, through our own not following of this law, of us being selfish, of us being unkind, that we've kind of broken that. So most of natural law is dealing with us in our brokenness, trying to work with and help the dignity of those of other people who are broken, healing ourselves and them at the same time. So there's this healing idea behind natural law. Fundamentally, natural law is all about love. That it's about us choosing the other ahead of ourselves. For example, I can't kill you because you annoy me. I'm going to choose your life above my annoyance. I can't steal from you because I want what you have. Because out of love, I'm not going to choose my desires above your dignity and rights. This is the foundation of natural law. Natural law written into the hearts of every man, that we are called to recognize the dignity of every other human person. Now, as we look at natural law foundationally is codified in a very particular document that I'm sure you're aware of, called the Ten Commandments. Now, the Ten Commandments, these are part of the Old Law. There are two forms of revealed law. There's the Old Law and the New Law. The Old Law is basically the Ten Commandments. It's that which is brought forth in the Old Testament. And we have the New Law. The New Law is given by Jesus himself. Now, when we're going to spend most of this semester looking at the Old Law, but I want to make sure that I do at least touch on how law works. Foundation, the base of law comes in eternal law. This is God's law, God's being in and of himself that dictates all the universe. But that fundamentally acts for us within natural law, the law that is imputed onto humankind. Natural law is fully and is shown to us most fully through revelation, through God revealing that law to us. To some degree, we all kind of know somewhere inside of us that we're supposed to be nice to people. We know that it's better to be kind than to be unkind. We know that it's better to be compassionate than to be cruel. Like we have some basic idea somewhere in our heart of how we're supposed to behave. But because of our darkened intellect, because of our sin, because we make mistakes, we don't always get it right. And so God reveals law to us so that we can understand it better, so that we can more closely follow that which is actually living that out. In the old law, and that's the Ten Commandments, in the new law, that's most expressed in the Beatitudes, and of course in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. But beyond that, we also have other law that comes from other competent authority. For example, we have civil law. Now, what's the base? The base is eternal law. Next comes natural law. I'm not allowed to break natural law because the government says I should. I can't go, kill my mom because the government says that's the new law. Natural law is of greater. Maybe I should reverse this. First comes eternal law, then comes natural law. So natural law is higher than civil law. Then comes ecclesiastical law, and then comes civil law. So we have God's eternal law, then we have the law that's revealed to us in natural law. There's some gradation here because we have eternal law given to us, revealed to us, and then we have natural law that's just written on us. And then we have ecclesiastical law. This is the law of the church that tells us how we're to regulate our lives. And then last but not least, we have civil law. This is the law that tells us how we're organizing ourselves within our society. Notice that all of these have competent authority, right? The God has the ultimate authority, and that comes to us through revealed law and through natural law. We have the church has authority. It tells us how we're supposed to behave. The government has an authority. It tells us how we're supposed to work within our society. These laws are all competent authority, so we're called to follow them. What I wanted to start working on in depth, though, and what we're going to be really working on over the rest of this semester, is taking a look very carefully at natural law or at revealed law through the Old Testament. We're going to really start taking a look at the Ten Commandments. Now, what are the Ten Commandments? The first three commandments are in reference to how the human person relates to the divine. Right? That we as human persons are called to have a relationship with the divine, with God. So how are we to do that? Like, what do we need to do to be able to reach the fullness of the relationship that we're called to with God? And then, so the first three commandments are going to be related to how the individual relates to God. The next 7 commandments are going to be on how God relates to man. So we have how we relate to God and how we relate to man, and so both of these are deeply important. I'm actually going to start this semester working with the ones that have to do with man, because these are the ones. This is the better base to start from, and then we're going to come back and look at 1 through 3 on how the human person is meant to relate to the divine, how the person is meant to relate to the divine, to God. So let's take a look at the 7 commandments that we have that are how we relate to man. Now remember, the law is fundamentally about the dignity of the human person, that every single person, regardless of who they are, just because they're human, has a right to be respected and to be honored. So all 7 of these are going to be about respecting and honoring the human person. Right? So let's go through them real quick, and we're just going to breeze through and make sure that we have at least heard them. These 7 commandments, the 4th commandment is honor thy father and thy mother. The 5th commandment, thou shalt not kill. The 6th commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery. The 7th commandment, thou shalt not steal. The 8th commandment, you shall not bear false witness against another person. Right? So this would include perjury. This would include most lying, not all lying, but most lying. We also have the 9th commandment. The 9th commandment, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. And the 10th commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's goods. So looking at this, I'm just looking right now at the most base part of these commandments. You're going to find as we start really looking at each one of these commandments individually that they cover a much larger spectrum than one would think. Let me give you an example. Thou shalt not kill. Well, I'm guessing you haven't killed anybody lately. That's good. But there's more to thou shalt not kill than thou shalt not murder people, right? Thou shalt not kill also includes unjust anger. It also includes trying to hurt people. It includes trying to cut people under through talking behind their back. This commandment is much larger than just not murdering people, right? Same thing's true with honor thy father and thy mother. Honoring thy father and mother, sure, that's about, being obedient when you're young and and having honor for them as you get older. But it's also about respecting everyone who has competent authority over us. It's about respecting police officers and politicians. It's about respecting teachers and mentors. It's about respecting anyone that God has given authority over us. So as we look at each one of these, we're going to find that they're larger than they look. They look like they're just 9 or 7 simple rules that we just kind of do those things and you're good. But as we really start to analyze them, we find that they are really just capstones to a much larger idea. How do we know this is the case? How do we know it's not just thou shalt not kill, right? Instead of thou shalt not also, talk behind somebody's back. The way we know that is through Jesus. So we have the old law as it's written, but Jesus clarifies that law. He takes that law and he expands it. He helps us to understand that it's much, much deeper than we think it is. You have heard it said, thou shalt not kill, but I tell you, even if you're angry with your brother, you are liable to judgment. So he tells us that we're meant to look deeply into these commandments, that we're meant to look deeply into the old law to be able to really figure out how it is that we're called to behave. And that is exactly what we're going to be doing this semester. So I wanted to spend just this moment to make sure you kind of get the whole gamut. Remember, number one, we have God's eternal law, right? And that comes to us through revealed law, through the old law and the new law, the Old Testament and the New Testament, right? We also have natural law. And natural law is that law which is written on all mankind, not just those who have recognized the revealed law, but every human person. And then, of course, we have ecclesiastical law and we have civil law. And this form of law is where we get all of our moral tenets. So any morality that we state, if I say it's right or wrong to do X, Y, or Z, I have to reference that to the competent authority that I've been given. I have to reference that to the law. For example, if I say that it's wrong for you to drive over, 45 miles an hour because there's a sign there, it's not the sign that's the authority, it's the civil law that's the authority, and that's why we have to obey it. If I tell you that baptism has to be done with water and particular words, well, that falls under ecclesial law. There's no other way to do that. If I tell you that it's wrong for you to murder someone, that's going to come under natural law. And if we talk about the dignity of the human person, that every human person has the rights and has right to honor and respect, that comes from God's eternal law. That because we are made in his image and likeness, that we have a dignity that is our own. This means that every single human person is under all of this law. And that all of this law is meant for the primary purpose of the eternal law, the dignity of the human person. In other words, law is not fundamentally about a list of rules that you're supposed to follow, or you're a bad person. That's not untrue, but it's not the point. Law is about respecting your dignity and the dignity of everyone around you. It's about honoring the human person. That's what law is about. So, and it doesn't matter which stage of law we're talking about, law is fundamentally about the respecting and honoring of every single human person as they were made by God. So we're going to talk about all of those things in depth, but I wanted to make sure you got this basic idea of law. So now we have these things. We've talked about moral judgments. We've talked about where morality does not come from. Now we know where morality does come from. Morality comes from law, and it comes from the law, first eternal law, then of course natural law, then ecclesial law, and then civil law. This ordering is what gives us the morality that we're all called to bring into our life. I realized that was a whole bunch in once, and I wish we had more time to go over it, but I hope that God blesses you this week, and look forward to seeing you next. God bless.